Chris, if you want to say anything else.
Sure. Step one, can you see some slides on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. That's always a good start. All right, so I am Chris Kirk. For some odd reason, I've picked up the nickname of Captain. I have no idea how that happened. But if you ever need to reach out to me, you can find me captain@microsoft.com wait, no. We will not release the secret identity on Twitter, but captain@microsoft.com will get to me. I've been with Microsoft for 19 years now. Prior to that, I was a graduate of Iowa State's cybersecurity program. Spent my first 10 years at Microsoft doing software development in Windows, and then transferred over to this new little startup team, the detection and response team, known as the Ghostbusters at the time, that was doing incident response for targeted threats, nation-state actors, for primarily defense and government customers at the time. But we were just getting into the private sector as well, mostly financial, tech companies, and a couple of other places. So I've helped grow DaRT from this tiny little 8-person team from when I started to we're over 150 employees right now and growing rapidly. So I selected this as the slides that would probably be the most interesting. This is something I presented at DEF CON earlier this summer, but I'm adding a little bit more material, and I'll skip over some stuff in case anybody caught that live. And at any point in time, just kind of interrupt me. We'll switch directions and go wherever it is that you'd like this meeting to go. So, who is DaRT? Many years ago, about 12 years ago, Microsoft had a bit of a problem. We had some customers that were reaching out with security issues, and they were coming to Microsoft for help. So that you know Windows and you know Microsoft products better than anyone. We have these security issues. Why don't you have a team of consultants who can help us with our problem? And thus, a small band of customer-obsessed consultants were put together who would run around and chase villains. It's a pretty exciting life. At the time, everything was on site. We would fly to wherever in the world it was the customer was. We'd sit in their conference rooms. We would take over their executive offices, and we would educate on how to use the products better, educate on what the threat actors were doing, what their motivations were, build better defenses, and in doing so, build better Microsoft products as well. The biggest difference between DaRT and a lot of the other security vendors that you'll find out there, a lot of the really cool, interesting teams, Mandiant, CrowdStrike, Cisco Talos, Unit 42, Palo Alto, a bunch of these groups, is we're pure brand protection. Microsoft isn't trying to make money on us or on security. We're really there just to make sure that people keep looking at Microsoft as a safe platform to run business on, which is a fun and interesting place to be. So now, having been on this team for 9 years, we've got this this grizzled old veteran that I introduced myself to all of our new hires during our hunter training program, and I basically explained the philosophies that have made our team what it is. And first and foremost of that is an incident response. Everyone hunts, no matter who you are on the team, and no one quits. Threat hunting is the ultimate core of incident response. It's find the anomalies, find the weird things going on in an environment, understand what's causing them, and fix them. The anomalies aren't always necessarily a threat actor doing something bad. It can also sometimes just be a misconfiguration, or it could be security users or regular users getting around your security admins. And if you get into security and you're doing something on defense, this is something you're going to need to keep an eye out for. That users have a job, right? right? You're working for a company that sells hammers for a living. They're going to sell hammers, and if security gets in the way, they will move around. So the goal is for security to be a necessary evil wherever they go. And this has kind of expanded over time into what I've dubbed the captain's laws for our team culture and kind of what drives us and makes us go. Number one thing on incident response and consulting is, do no harm. That we can never make things worse in the act of investigating an issue or helping a customer recover from an issue. And that drives everything we do. And you'd be amazed how often that can come up. You'll have advice of, well, just disconnect the internet and the problem goes away. Sure, now your company doesn't make money. Now nothing works. So always driving that. And number two is, do the needful. Like whatever it is that the customer needs, we're there. And this is an odd philosophy for a lot of consulting teams to have that try to very carefully define what they do and what they don't do. And our approach is our statement of services, if you ever sign a contract with us, is blank. We could do nothing for 5 consecutive days and then walk away, and we have achieved our objective in writing. Because we keep it extremely vague so that we're there for 5 days. Whatever it is you need done, we'll go and do. We've done app compat work. We have racked servers before in a lab because that's what the customer needed. We finished everything else. We're like, well, my flight doesn't leave until Friday afternoon, so let's just start rewiring this lab. And the one I get comments on the most is don't get caught. And there's a reason why it's the third and most, the third in the priority list for things that make this team what it is. If you're truly doing whatever it is that the customer needs, if you're really going out of your way to cause no harm with whatever it is you're doing, you're going to ruffle a lot of feathers. One of the bits of advice I like to give people is if the customer ever says, we're taking my private plane from here to this other data center and getting to work, get on the private plane, and when you land, ask whether or not you're allowed to get on a private plane, because you're not. But if you ask first, now you can't go. So it's all about do what needs doing in order to help the customer and try not to get caught doing it. This next one is a sticky point, and I bet something like this will come up in your ethics class. And that is, to speak only truth. And it's not to say don't lie, right? It's be careful about admitting the truth, be careful about misleading the customers. In security, the trust of your company leadership, your management, executives, partners, your employees is the most important thing you have. You will give a lot of bad news working with security. Whether you go offense or defense, whatever it is that you are doing, you are going to share a lot of bad news. And it's better to be the person who can be trusted to tell it as it is rather than to try and put spin on things or cover things up. And that level of truth and that trusted advisor status will take you far. And it will allow you to be the change that you want to see in this field. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in cybersecurity right now. There's a war going on in Ukraine, which has an interesting component of cyber warfare going along with it. Standard playbook for the region is to disrupt power grids, telecommunications, government networks in advance of physical truth movements. And we're seeing a lot of attempts at that in Ukraine. There's a lot of corporate espionage going on in the world, some of it being reported and some of it isn't. There are a ton of regimes around the world that are monitoring for political dissidents and taking action accordingly. There's a lot of poorly secured networks out there, and if we want to make this change, it's up to us to be that change that we want to see. And more career advice on wherever it is you end up going. save the willing. Our team is still relatively small in the grand scheme of things. I mean, even at 150 people, we can only be in so many places at once. And I've occasionally had to coach people through if a company isn't really willing to change, if a company isn't really willing to do their part to assist in self-rescue, if you will, we can't force them to, and protect their network, to kick threat actors out of their environment, to save themselves from ransomware. Save the ones that are willing to participate in that effort. Next to last is just make it better. Like we try and have everybody on the team go into every situation and evaluate how could it have gone better. It doesn't matter if it was successful or not. How could we have done it better next time? Because the threat actors out there are continuously evolving, and it's important that we do. And the last is part of what really makes DaRT, I think, and that is no other help is coming. When we send DaRT places, that's all there is. It is up to us to solve the problem. And that doesn't mean that we have to have all of the answers, but it does mean that no one in DaRT is allowed to walk away from a situation saying, I can't fix that, or I don't know the answer. We once had a team of people come into a customer site. We sit down first day, we're getting briefed on what had happened, why they brought us in to do an investigation. And they said, all right, so here's what we have found so far. We found this threat actor. They're coming out of this Tor node on, Mondays and Wednesdays, they're coming in out of Tor node. They're going here, they're doing this thing, and then they're setting up flow to exfiltrate data through email to this location over here. What do we do? Our lead investigator says, interesting. All right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go step out in the hall here. We're gonna build up a plan here real quick. We'll be back in a few minutes. We'll discuss the plan. We'll break down into a bunch of actions. We'll start executing on the plan. Sound good? Cool. We get out into the hallway. Everybody looks at each other and they goes, what is flow? None of us have ever heard of flow before. First time it had ever been used by a threat actor. First time it had ever come up in conversation. So we're all on our phones and we're Googling flow, and it turns out it's a Microsoft thing. It is this new Microsoft feature that had come out that we had never heard of, that a threat actor was now using to steal a bunch of data. But there you go. The threat actor found this first, and so we're rapidly becoming the world experts on flow, because it's up to us. There is no one else that we're going to just reach out to and say, flow is involved. This is your problem now. I would encourage you to have kind of a similar philosophy. So I can keep talking about DaRT. I can keep talking about what we do on the team, how we do it, and why we do it. I could talk about the different career paths within DaRT, or even different career paths within cybersecurity. I can tell fun and interesting stories. What's interesting? What would you like?
Let's go for stories. I'm always up for story time.
Yeah. Stories. All right, stories. Well, my opening story is going to be kind of fresh on my mind because of a briefing I'm going to be giving in a few days to another customer. Periodically, we get asked to do executive briefings, and the very last question of the briefing was super exciting to me. Easily my favorite question, and I try and encourage people to ask it again. They asked me, what should be keeping us up at night that isn't on our radar? Because we had just talked about a couple of threat actors. We had just talked about what groups are attacking military organizations, what groups are going after government data or similar. And then there was this very open-ended question, and I responded with, well, there's something I would love to share. I've been trying to figure out how to share, and I can't. So the number one issue is that so many companies, so many organizations are outsourcing everything more and more. And it complicates things from a defense and response perspective. So Microsoft has this program. If we discover that somebody is under a targeted attack, we will reach out and notify them. So we have processes in place. If over the course of monitoring what, let's say, Iran is up to in the world, and we discover that they are going after the professors or the research labs at Iowa State, we'll reach out and we will notify. We'll provide some information to help you defend. But if you keep outsourcing, that gets harder and harder to do. I found a subsidiary. I found this tiny little startup company that had one customer, one military customer, and no other customers. And that particular subsidiary was breached. It is obvious what they were stealing. They were stealing the data from this military customer that the subsidiary is supporting. But the subsidiary is so small, so tiny, so few employees, they have no business relationship with Microsoft, and I have no way of reaching out and notifying them. But because it's their data, I can't notify the military. So now what do I do? You know, and I spent weeks trying to figure out ways that you know I'm capable of supporting customers and doing the right thing when we break out that far. And that trend is continuing over time. Supply chain attacks like SolarWinds, they're one thing where you go after commonly used software that will be in a lot of places that you want to be. I mean, SolarWinds products are in the vast majority of major enterprises in the world. That's one thing you can do, but another thing you can do is you can keep going after the hosting providers. You can keep going after the solutions providers. Go after the help desk companies, right? Very few people have that many help desk employees anymore. They've outsourced that business. And as you outsource these things, security is one of the things that frequently suffers. You know, and so I then spent like the last 15 minutes of that briefing discussing the implications, the security implications of outsourcing more and more control of it. Fun, interesting stories. Team record, I think, is still 2 hours from, we received a phone call from somebody asking for assistance, and the flight left the ground. We called up a couple of analysts on the team and told them to start driving to the airport, and we would have a plane ticket waiting for them when they got there, because we didn't want them to slow down long enough to actually book their own ticket. Let's see. We have sent a team to the Arctic Circle. So this is one of those rare moments where we can talk customers. DaRT's philosophy is not to discuss the customers that we help unless they come forward first. And the government of Nunavut in Canada was kind enough to come forward and discuss. So they got hit with ransomware. And they're an interesting situation in which they are way out on the outskirts of civilization, right? There's a lot of difficulty in getting people and supplies into region. There's a lot of people that require government assistance in order to survive, particularly during like the winter times. And so when the regional government's systems were all taken down by ransomware, this put lives at risk, right? Like they no longer had the records or the ability to distribute, food and supplies what they needed. They didn't have, safety services, medical services, fire services necessarily accessible. And so in we go. And as our team likes to do, I mean, there was no joke arm wrestling and arguing over who would get to go, because when else do you get a chance to go fly to the Arctic Circle? And so we're on site assisting a customer in a place that like there are no roads. you take snowmobiles places because that's the road. We worked a school district once. This story actually came from an internal story time. We had to get together with people, and a couple of the other veterans were talking about their first case with DaRT. One of them was telling the story about how apparently I was the lead investigator for his first engagement with DaRT. I didn't remember any of it, so I was asking him to kind of tell the story to everybody and not have to admit that I didn't remember the story at all. It was a school district. So a school district had been ransomed, as so many places get ransomed these days. And it was either the entire state or like a good third of the nation had lost the ability to function, if you will. They didn't have student records. They didn't have, they couldn't run services. So school was closed, and school was going to be closed until operations were restored. Day one, we sit in, they introduced the plan. So that here's this plan. In 12 days, we're going to get operations up and running. They'll still be limping along, but we work really hard. We're really aggressive. We work long hours. We can go from nothing is working to, we can open up the schools. We can start accessing records. Most of our backups will be there. 12 days. And I talked briefly to our team, and then I said, absolutely not. Because what we had been doing that first day is we've been getting a feel for what was really important to the customer. What was their business? As a consultant, right? Like I don't know their business and their operations the way they do, and that's the first thing I have to figure out. And what I discovered is that a very large percentage of their students had no food security. That their only guaranteed meal was from school. And so this aggressive, and it was an aggressive plan to get everything up and running in 12 days, still meant that something like 1/3 or 40% of students in that area were going to go hungry for 12 days. And no, DaRT was not okay with that. And so, yeah, we pulled an all-nighter, and yeah, we did some really wild and crazy and dumb things, but we had them limping along. And I have to go back and check the notes. Not in front of me right now. 2.5 days, 3 days, something like that. And it was at least enough that they could open the doors again. They could start serving again while we got the rest of the stuff. And it was this really proud moment for this now veteran on DaRT, and at the time brand new hire on the team. That was what drove us, and that's why we work the crazy hours and we do the innovation that we do, which is a lot better story than the one that I tell, which was I transferred from being a dev in Windows to come over and join DaRT. And after I accepted the transfer, I said, all right, well, I need some time to finish up the work that I'm doing here before I go. And like a week later, the new boss says, hey, is there any way that you can get here faster? I said, all right, sure, I'll speed this up. I'll get there, a week or so faster. And then a little bit before that, the day before I'm supposed to start on the team, I have a plane ticket. Get on this plane, go to this location, we've got work for you. The day before I even start on the team, it was a bank. It was a bank that has my money in it. The root cause of the issue was a 3-letter password that can be found in the dictionary. This was my introduction to high-level security and incident response. Let me get this straight. This company is losing between $250,000 and $1 million a day right now because of business email compromise. And what the threat actor was doing is they were basically monitoring outgoing emails. And then they would reply, oh, I'm terribly sorry. I gave you the wrong routing number. I meant to say, please send that $200,000 to this new routing number. Then they would casually delete that from the outbox so that the real user would have a harder time finding that message that he sent. And this guy's getting paid this way. You know, $1 million a day out of a bank that has my money in it. And the root cause was a 3-letter password. And that was an eye-opening experience. And that has been followed by learning things one cannot unlearn about security vulnerabilities and patch status of ATM machines, of voting machines, of payment processing centers. Oof, terrifying stuff. This was a few years ago now, but call it 7 years ago, 6 years ago. One of the payment processing companies that has the contract for one of the services I use every month was run entirely on Windows 2000 boxes. Windows 2000 boxes, which, wow, it's been so long that that's been out of life, I don't even remember. July 2010 is when that went out of service. So 12 years ago, that went out of service. And 7 years ago, that was still running payment, credit card payment processing. It's weird what's going on out there. I guess I'll tell a positive story, and then I'll ask, what else do you want to know, or open up to some Q&A. There are some really cool and interesting places out there as well. We once settled into a place that claimed to have really good security. And so, I'm just asking a couple of casual questions just to kind of get an understanding of what that really means. And the first thing I'm asking about is, do you have any systems that are, end of life? Do you have a Windows 2000 box or a Server 2003 box still in your environment somewhere? Because almost every company has one somewhere. And they probably say no, they don't have any at all. And I'm looking through the notes and I'm like, I see one. You do have one. And that was just kind of that start of going through the basics and say there's probably some basics that you are still missing. Maybe you thought you got all of it, but you didn't. I gave him the IP address. That was all he asked for. What's the IP address of that thing? He leaves the room, comes back in under 5 minutes, and says, I found the system. The name is, whatever the name of that computer was. The owner of that computer is whatever that employee was. I called them. They said, oh, yes, this was supposed to be decommissioned. Apparently, we didn't actually power it off and take it off the network. The problem has been fixed. In under 5 minutes of reporting this thing, found the owner, talked to them, took it offline, which is really something. That seems like no big deal, right? If you go back to your dorm or you go to your lab and you find a computer based on IP, that's not so bad. When you're a worldwide company and you've got 500,000 systems, finding something by IP and then being able to act on it is easier said than done. Any questions for me?
So I got the 5-minute warning a little bit ago. It seems like the meeting's going to be ending very soon. Do you want to start a second meeting and we can do a Q&A in that one?
This will stay open until I close it. I just did not set this to a full hour the way that I think we originally intended.
Yeah, okay,
So,
no worries.
Yeah. If you don't need to go anywhere, I don't need to go anywhere. You've got me for another 30 minutes.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we also usually do a post-meeting cabinet hangout, if you're up to hang out for that.
I'm sure we'll have questions and stuff. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, cool. Are we good to transition to a Q&A, or is there anything else major from the presentation you had?
Oh, I've got 3 different presentations open over here, so I can go pretty much any given direction. So let's just open it up to some Q&A, and maybe the answers will just take longer than you thought.
Okay, we don't actually know what microphones we use right now, so I have no clue how well anybody's going to be able to hear, so we might just do mic checks if somebody has a question before we talk, and then worst case scenario, we can relay it. But yeah, we'll be good. I guess I can start it off with an alarm. Oh, from my roommate too, sweet. So I was just curious, going through this, I know you can't talk much about the clients you work with, but could you give us a sense of like the size of the companies you're working with? Is Microsoft a lot devoted to, huge, multinational organizations, or are you guys going towards more smaller businesses that have more interesting incident responses? I know you mentioned schools and stuff like that, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Certainly, yeah. It has changed a little bit over time. When we started, the original consultants worked in Microsoft's public sector consulting space. So all of our customers were public sector. So defense, federal government, state government, that kind of space. And we have expanded over time. Because we are relatively small, and because we are chasing nation state actors, right? We're chasing military intelligence groups, we're chasing high-end crime gangs. We are not cheap. So we end up being accessible mostly only to large companies. I think the vast majority of our customers have more than 10,000 computers. It's pretty commonplace for one of our customers that will help to have more than 100,000 computers. I think the record, and we've hit it 3 or 4 times now, is somewhere around 750,000 computers. And our goal is in and out within one or 2 weeks. So when you hit something like 750,000 computers, okay, then yeah, we go ahead and reset the scope of expectations. We're going to be here for 6 weeks, right? Like, this is going to take a while to do an investigation because that's a lot of data. But we are primarily large companies. Think banks and credit card companies you've heard of, Fortune 500 companies, federal governments. Where it gets interesting is we do a whole bunch of things that you don't necessarily think about with incident response, and that a lot of people, even at Microsoft, don't really know that we do. We do real-time monitoring for events. If you've got a sporting event, like a famous sporting event, we're almost certainly behind the scenes monitoring that in real time. Telethons, no joke. In some places in the world, telethons are still a thing, and they're still really big. And we have, in the past, been there supporting them in real time in case something happens. There's a initiative within Microsoft. It used to be called Defending Democracy, and it now has some other name that is not Defending Democracy. Clearly, that name hasn't stuck yet. And we are a large part of that. So if you are running an election, you can reach out to Microsoft, and you will get, so far as I know, free of charge, you will get assistance in helping harden and monitor those elections. We'll offer you advice. We set up war rooms 24/7 to support in the event that something happens. You can reach directly out to us, and we have teams of people ready to act. There is another program called Microsoft Services Disaster Response, which has been very, very popular these last couple of years. And the original concept behind this was more natural disaster. The first time, in fact, that they sent us somewhere, they sent it to us under the natural disaster response for a hurricane. We were there doing cybersecurity, but it was all ultimately, tied up underneath a hurricane response plan. And it's that same concept that if there is human suffering and loss of life and other risk, Microsoft services are free. Don't worry about it. We're here to help. And where this usually comes into play is if, like, there's flooding in Texas after a hurricane, and all of a sudden a bunch of data centers are out of action. All right, we can come in. Turns out we've built a couple of data centers. We can help get data centers up and running faster, right? We can help do data restore. We can transfer things out of your local data centers and put them up into Azure, and then you've got access to data again, and you've got scalable IT services. That's extended in our space in a couple of ways. They used it for the war in Ukraine, which is interesting politically, as far as I'm concerned. This is an interesting thing for Microsoft to do. But it ultimately came down to there's cyber attacks that are taking out, risking power grids, telecommunications, water and basic services, and putting civilians at risk. And that is the MSDR mission. So in goes DaRT. And we're there helping to keep the lights on, quite literally. Have done similar missions in other places. When Afghanistan fell, when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, we had a bunch of nonprofit organizations reach out and say, we have people in the country, and they have data on their laptops with, I don't want to say collaborators, but like people who are assisting these nonprofits that are focused on healthcare and education and elections and other progressive things. And those people would be at risk if the Taliban gets their name. How do we protect the names of those people, and how do we protect our aid workers in country who have the username and password to the laptop that has the data? And so, in we go. There's risk to health and safety. We've now done this for ransomware as well. We've now responded. A nation had met the bar for free disaster response services due to a ransomware attack that really crippled the country and took out a lot of government systems and a lot of financial and other systems in the country. We have another thing that we can do because we're brand protection, right? DaRT is not here to make money. I am authorized to offer free services kind of at our discretion or at Microsoft's best interests for customers that need it and that can't reasonably afford it. And the case study that we used for this originally were think tanks and news organizations. Nobody clicks on ads anymore, so these news organizations aren't exactly getting paid. And yet, there's not a nation-state threat actor out there that would not like to be inside of the Associated Press or reporters, right? You want to know, who are these reporters talking to? What stories are they about to leak? And what's the inside scoop? Every major nation is going to want to know this. But there's no way they can afford our services. And the other cool thing about them is because every nation-state wants to be in there, that's where you're going to learn all the stuff. If we want to find a new threat actor or a new attack campaign that no one in the world knows about, that a think tank is the kind of place you're going to find it. And it allows us to go help those customers that could use our help and learn more about the adversaries of the world without getting hung up on price and cost. So we do support small customers. We once supported a customer that had 27 computers. We send a 4-person team, and we're there for a minimum of 5 days when we help the company. They had 27 computers. So, we do work small cases from time to time, but by and large, we are, global entity, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands.
Sweet, cool. Anybody else got some outstanding questions? Yeah. Say something and see if you can hear you.
What is the best way to get started in a career like yours?
Ooh. Best way to get started in a career like mine. Wow. I'm pretty happy with the way my career has turned out. That being said, please don't do it the way I did it, because that was certainly a bumpy and weird and roundabout thing. I selected my career path when I was an undergrad. I found the thing, I was going to do it. The security background process took considerably longer than I thought. way longer than I thought. And so it's the week of finals. I'm graduating in a couple of days, and I'm staring down no job and not really sure what I'm going to be doing that summer. And so I did what, you know, a few other people have done. I flunked into grad school. So I went from, my original plan was software engineering and machine learning, to my new plan, which was cybersecurity, which was my other big passion. And then I did what most people do after they get a degree. I didn't use it. You know, so now I have a master's in security, and I go working for Microsoft, working on Windows on a team that didn't really do security. Because that's kind of how it goes. You know, but I'm very passionate about security. I'm very passionate about big data and machine learning. And wherever I went and whatever teams I worked on, that just kept coming up over and over. And so I just kept finding myself moving into positions that were data science related and that were security related, until eventually an incident response team, you know, picked me up. I'll try and give you a slightly better path than that, hopefully a little faster path. Internships are huge. The education is a great part. The other thing that you want to demonstrate is some work experience and some practical stuff, and the connections that you get with that. Internships are a fantastic option. If internships are not an option, there are other fun and interesting things you can do as well to get that extra little bit of something. You can volunteer at Black Hat or DEF CON. And in doing so, you get to go to those conferences. You get to meet a bunch of people. You get to ask questions, get exposed to things, try things out. So not only are you, you know, volunteering and or working. I used to lead a team of volunteers for Black Hat before the pandemic. You actually got paid. You didn't get paid that well. I mean, I think they just paid minimum wage, but like you actually did get paid. You got a room, you got food, you got some cash, and you got multiple sessions of career mentorship and a chance to meet a bunch of the speakers at Black Hat. In fact, I hauled my team of volunteers over to meet basically my entire management team at the time, because they were sponsoring another event, like one hotel over, and so I just had us take 30 minutes off, drag them over there, and introduce them all. Volunteering, doing capture the flag exercises, doing like DEF CON's capture the flag exercises. The old ones are out there public. You know, you can go play with them if you don't get a chance to do them in person. Contributing to open source projects. There's plenty of things that you can do out there that just demonstrates that you're contributing or learning things or doing things outside of school. Those are all great helps. As you get going, I encourage trying to be a bit of a generalist, at least early on, because you're going to want to know at least a little bit about everything in order to be successful as a specialist. But if you're looking for places to specialize, the #1 career path in DaRT has changed a lot over its 12 years of existence. The sysadmins on our team used to be the hottest role. And the reason why they were the most important role was because we carried around our own basically portable data center whenever we did work. We would fly our own compute power. The customer data never left their own conference room. And if they were truly paranoid, if they did not trust us, or they just had that level of policy, they could, when we were done, pull the hard drives out of those systems and put them in a wood chipper. The data truly never left their control. And so as a result of that, like the admins that kept rebuilding these systems and tuning these systems and keeping these databases going, I mean, here you see this graph of the data volume that we're processing over time, and you're seeing it's growing a lot. You know, maintaining those systems was the hardest part of the job. It was a challenge. That changed over time, and it became the reverse engineer became the most critical role on the team. The ability to analyze malware, to evaluate threat actors, to build effective detections and defenses against that malware was the big thing. But over time, you know, you start switching to more and more malwareless attacks, more living off the land approaches of breaking into environments. And so forensics became the hot thing. Being able to build the timeline and tell the story, even in situations where there is not malware involved, and it's more just running PowerShell scripts and using open source tools and a bunch of things. And that's continued to evolve. The two things I see coming forward, you want to know what's really going to be in the demand. Data science is one of them. Security is struggling under this big data problem. And, you know, I include that cartoon there because it is accurate. As fast as we finish building our data platforms in order to process data and, you know, basically be able to detect things faster and better than anyone else, we start work on the next platform to replace the new one. We have a team of full-time devs that's all they do. Build the current one until it's ready, and then go build the next one after that because everything's growing so fast. The other one is identity. Everything is moving to the cloud, and everything's really being driven by identity these days. If a company needs security people who understand Exchange servers, you know, email servers, and web servers, and on-premise domain controllers, those experts are out there. You can find them, you can get them in there, they can help you. The huge shortage is no one understands the cloud. The people of Amazon do not understand their cloud. The people of Google do not understand their cloud. The people of Microsoft do not understand their cloud. I mean, it's changing so fast. The features are dropping so fast, and the security implications of those features are frequently, you know, not caught by the companies in question. That companies can't find cloud experts. They can't find people who deeply understand identity and can follow those records and make sense of that. If you're looking for certifications to get, and I certainly wouldn't encourage you to do that one first. You know, there's some cloud identity certifications, identity access management stuff that Microsoft has out there, and it might even be free for you as long as you have an EDU account. You might be able to get to it on LinkedIn Learning for free. Great stuff. Maybe not the first one to go and take, but great stuff, and it will really drive a career for a long stretch of time because you have no competition. There aren't enough data scientists who understand security. There aren't enough people who deeply understand how identity and authentication works and can defend against the kind of attacks.
Cool, sweet. Well, yeah, we've got like 10 minutes left, and we did not lie. There is pizza. The people at Papa John's are just hella late. So I think we're going to bring the pizza in, and we'll kind of just mingle. If you want to stay on the line, we can just ask questions more casually, kind of just hang out and have some pizza if that works for everybody.
Absolutely. I'll stop the recording. I'll go grab something to drink as well. I unfortunately don't have any pizza with me.
Yeah,
And,
sorry we can't
keep the questions coming.
Well, I can show that later.
Oh, yeah.
We've been working.